For 5.5 years, the world has watched a story unfold that defies belief. A story of missing children, mysterious deaths, and a web of dark, apocalyptic beliefs that culminated in the destruction of an entire family. At the center of it all has been one woman, Lori Vallow Daybell. We have heard from prosecutors, from grieving family members, from journalists, and from former friends. But we have never truly heard from her, until now, in a move that stunned observers. Lori Vallow Daybell, the woman convicted of murdering her own 2 children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, and conspiring to murder her husband's former wife, Tammy Daybell, sat down for a jailhouse interview. She spoke, in her own words, for the first time since her arrest. What follows is not just a transcript. It is a psychological blueprint. It is a rare, unfiltered look into the mind of a convicted killer who remains utterly convinced of her own innocence. This is a journey into a world of profound delusion, unshakable narcissism, and a chilling reinterpretation of reality. Our goal today is to deconstruct this interview, piece by piece. We will place Lori's words under a psychological microscope to understand the mechanisms at play. How does a person responsible for such heinous acts present herself as a victim? How does she reconcile her faith with her crimes? And what can her performance teach us about the nature of malignant narcissism and the terrifying power of shared delusion? This is more than a story about what happened. This is a deep dive into the why. And it all begins with a simple, disarmingly cheerful greeting. The interview, conducted by journalist Nate Eaton, who has covered this case from the beginning, opens not with a somber reflection, but with the casual air of 2 old acquaintances catching up. This initial exchange is the first and perhaps most critical layer of the psychological onion we are about to peel.
How are you?
Good.
You ready?
Yeah, are any of my people here? Oh, okay. Hi.
Good to see you.
Nate, such a pleasure.
Have a seat. And
Long time coming, huh?
it has been. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
So I want to start with Chad.
Okay.
You told me years ago.
Today is my birthday.
Today is your birthday.
How old do you think that I am?
52.
Oh, how did you know?
I do my research.
You must know a lot.
Yeah.
Lori's opening is a masterclass in deflection and control. Notice the immediate tonal dissonance. She is in a maximum security prison, facing multiple life sentences for the murder of her children. Yet, her greeting is hello in bright, cheerful capital letters. She declares, "This is fun." This isn't just awkward. It's a profound psychological indicator. It's what psychologists call inappropriate affect, where a person's emotional response is completely out of sync with the reality of their situation. For Lori, this isn't a grim reckoning. It's a performance. She is the star of the show. Her immediate pivot to Nate's birthday is a classic narcissistic maneuver. Instead of addressing the gravity of her circumstances, she seizes control of the conversation by turning the focus onto the interviewer. Happy birthday. She then immediately makes it about herself. How old do you think I am? This isn't small talk. This is a test. She is gauging how much he knows, how much she can control the narrative. When he correctly guesses her age, her response, "You must know a lot," is both a playful jab and a subtle acknowledgement that she is a subject of intense study. She revels in this. The attention, even for horrific reasons, feeds the narcissistic ego. The exchange about being 25 plus 25 plus 2 is another layer of her constructed persona. She is trying to project youthfulness, charm, and wit. She's not a monster in a jumpsuit. She's a fun, as clever woman who can joke about her age. This is the creation of a false self, a carefully curated mask designed to hide the terrifying emptiness and malevolence underneath. It is the same mask her friends and family described before her transformation. The fun, beautiful, life of the party mom. She is trying to reactivate that persona, hoping it will be more persuasive than the mountains of evidence against her. After the initial pleasantries, Nate Eaton moves to the heart of the matter. Her relationship with Chad Daybell, the man convicted and sentenced to death for his role in the same murders.
So
Do the math.
you told me years ago Chad was the best man you've ever met.
Chad is a very kind person, yes.
Is that still true?
Yes.
So besides his spirituality, what else attracts you to Chad?
He's a wonderful person. Everyone who knows him knows that. You've never met him, right?
I haven't met him other than when we were in Hawaii.
I'm saying you never met him, talked to him, interacted with him, or...
No.
Yeah.
How often are you able to talk with him?
So we aren't really speaking.
By your own choice or just because it's not allowed from like prison to prison?
Yeah, like the way that the mail works here is very difficult. So we're only allowed to get postcards. Like you can't send a letter to the jail itself, and so there's difficulties within that.
But you still love him.
Lori's unwavering defense of Chad Daybell is perhaps the most critical element in understanding her psychology. This isn't just loyalty. It points strongly to a condition known as folie à deux, or shared psychotic disorder. This is a rare psychiatric syndrome in which a symptom of psychosis, often a delusional belief, is transmitted from one individual to another. Typically, there is a primary person who is genuinely delusional and a secondary, more submissive person who comes to adopt that delusion. In the Vallow Daybell case, it's a symbiotic relationship. Chad created the theological framework, the light and dark ratings, the zombies, the impending apocalypse. Lori, with her pre-existing narcissistic and histrionic traits, was a perfect vessel for these beliefs. They validated her own sense of specialness and gave her a divine justification for her darkest desires. Her statement, "Anybody who knew him knows that," is a form of gaslighting. She is attempting to invalidate the world's perception of Chad, a convicted murderer, by claiming that anyone who truly knew him would see the great man she sees. This creates an exclusive in-group, people who get it, and an out-group, the rest of the world, including the jury, who are deceived. The absolute certainty in her voice when she says, "We will, for sure, be exonerated," is not the hope of an innocent person. It is the unshakable conviction of a true believer. In her mind, the legal system is an irrelevant, temporary obstacle. The true judgment comes from God, and in that court, she and Chad are already vindicated. Her love for him isn't romantic in a conventional sense. It's the bond of two people who have built a shared reality, a fortress of delusion that protects them from the horrific truth of their actions. This reminds me of other infamous killer couples. Think of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, the Moores murderers. They too shared a twisted worldview that isolated them and enabled their horrific crimes. Or consider Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. While their dynamic was different, it was rooted in a shared, secret world of depravity. Lori and Chad's secret world was just cloaked in the language of salvation and scripture. The bond is forged not in love, but in the shared secret of their unforgivable sins. Her continued love for him is a psychological necessity. To admit Chad is a monster is to admit their entire belief system was a lie. And to admit that would be to admit she murdered her children for nothing. Her psyche cannot withstand that truth. The core of Lori's defense, and indeed her entire worldview, is a distorted and self-serving interpretation of her LDS Mormon faith. She sees herself not as a criminal, but as a modern-day prophetess, persecuted for her beliefs, just like figures from the scriptures.
Before he's executed?
Yes, Nate, before he's executed. You're well aware, I know that you are LDS as well as I am, right? And you're well aware that the three Nephites in 3 Nephi 28 were given the death penalty 7 times. They were arrested after Jesus personally translated them, okay? They were arrested, convicted, and given the death penalty 7 times. And where are they today?
I don't know.
They're still wandering the earth.
Yeah.
They didn't get executed.
So
they didn't get the death penalty. And there's 220 people in this country who have been on death row and have been exonerated and gone home.
Do you think it'll be soon then?
I think it'll be in the Lord's time. I know that it will be in the Lord's time. And when you say the word soon, if you've ever watched The Chosen or dealt with Jesus at all, you know that soon is a relative term because 1,000 years are a day to him.
This section is a chilling look into grandiose delusions and a messianic complex. Lori is not merely religious. She has cast herself as a central figure in a divine drama. Her reference to the 3 Nephites is incredibly revealing. In Mormon theology, these are ancient figures granted immortality by Jesus to minister on earth until the second coming. By comparing Chad, and by extension, herself, to them, she is elevating their case from a criminal matter to one of biblical cosmic significance. They are not murderers on death row. They are persecuted holy men who, like their scriptural predecessors, will be miraculously delivered by God. This is a powerful psychological defense mechanism. It allows her to reframe her entire situation. Prison is not punishment. It's a test of faith. The jury was not a panel of her peers. They were the ignorant persecutors. The death sentence is not a legal consequence. It is a trial from which God will deliver them. Her use of the phrase, "in the Lord's due time," is a convenient, non-falsifiable belief. If they are not exonerated tomorrow, or next year, or in 10 years, it's not because she's wrong. It's simply because it's not the Lord's time yet. This creates a perpetual escape hatch from reality. It's a common feature in doomsday cults. When the predicted apocalypse doesn't arrive, the date is simply moved, and the failure is reinterpreted as a test for the faithful. The analogy she draws with the movie Evan Almighty later in the interview reinforces this. She sees herself as Noah, building an ark while the world mocks her. She sees Nate, the journalist, as a skeptical reporter who only believes when the floodwaters are rising around him.
Lord, remember I told you to go watch a movie, Evan Almighty? And do you identify yourself with the reporter in that movie? So what does that mean? Okay, so when did the reporter change his mind, Nate? Remind me, Lori, when he was floating down the river in the flood on the boat until God showed the miracle. And when he was floating down the river in the flood is when his mind changed. So when you're ready to change your mind, I'd be happy to enlighten you on the things of God. This is not the reasoning of a rational person. This is the logic of someone who has completely detached from objective reality and constructed a new one where she is the protagonist and everyone else is just a supporting character in her divine story. She is not waiting for an appeal, she is waiting for a miracle. She is waiting for the flood. In her mind, the entire world will soon see that she was right all along, and their vindication will be spectacular and divine. This pattern is seen in other infamous cases, driven by religious delusion. Consider the case of the Lafferty brothers, Ron and Dan, whose story was detailed in Under the Banner of Heaven. They claimed to receive a removal revelation from God, commanding them to kill their sister-in-law and her baby daughter. They too saw themselves as instruments of God's will, acting on a higher law that superseded the laws of man. They were not murderers, they were righteous executioners. Lori Vallow operates from the exact same psychological playbook. When confronted with the human element of the trial, specifically Chad's legal team blaming her and her brother Alex Cox, Lori's explanation is not one of betrayal, but of a grand, strategic game that she is smart enough to understand.
So does it bother you, though, that in Chad's trial, he blamed it on you and Alex?
So now that I know the judicial system, and now that I have been my own attorney and how things work, and I've said this before in an interview, it's so different what goes on behind the scenes in a high-profile case. Okay, there's strategies going on, there's defenses going on, there's all these things going on that you wish, like, why can't we just go in and tell our side of the story? The attorneys are like, you can't do that. We have to come up with a defense, and we have to do this, and we have to do this, and like, why don't we just go? Why isn't it? You thought, like, if you've never been in the judicial system, which I hadn't before, you thought they get to tell their side of the story, what they think happened. You get to go in and tell your side of the story of what happened, and then the jury gets to decide. And that's not what happens. That's not what happens at all. And it's so sad and disappointing that that's.
So you think Chad, they had to come up with a defense just to have one in court? You don't think he really believed or blamed all of this on you and Alex? Absolutely.
And I know that for a fact because John Pryor came and told me that prior to trial.
He did. He said, this is going to be our defense.
He said, I'm going to blame you, and Chad doesn't want me to, and he wants you to know that. And this is the kind of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that nobody sees, that nobody.
Here we see the full force of her paranoid ideation and her need to be seen as intellectually superior. She isn't a pawn in the system. She's an expert who has figured it all out. By claiming, now that I've been my own attorney, she bestows upon herself a level of expertise and insight that others lack. Her explanation for Chad's defense strategy is a perfect example of how she twists reality to fit her narrative. A normal person would feel betrayed if their partner's lawyer blamed them for murder, but Lori reinterprets this. In her mind, it wasn't Chad betraying her, it was the lawyer, John Pryor, playing a strategic game, and Chad, the fine man, was against it. She even manufactures a secret behind-the-scenes conversation to support this, where the lawyer supposedly confesses his plan to her. Whether this conversation happened or not is almost irrelevant. What matters is that she has created a narrative that preserves Chad's sainthood and her own special insider knowledge. This is a classic feature of conspiratorial thinking. When faced with evidence that contradicts their worldview, the conspiracist doesn't abandon the worldview. Instead, they incorporate the contradictory evidence into the conspiracy. Evidence Chad's lawyer blamed Lori. Rational conclusion. This suggests a breakdown in their relationship or a legal strategy to save Chad at her expense. Lori's conspiratorial conclusion. This was all a forced legal maneuver by a rogue lawyer, part of the game of the corrupt justice system, and Chad was secretly against it. This proves how corrupt the system is and how noble Chad is. She extends this conspiracy to include the media, the prosecutors, and paid experts. She claims the state paid an expert $1 million to contradict their witnesses. She claims the media, starting with Nate Eaton himself, colluded with the police from day one to create a false narrative. Lori. The only evidence that was ever presented was the evidence that the state wanted to present. They manipulate the evidence to make it look like whatever they want. And guess who helps them? The media helps them because from day one, when somebody called you and said, "Hey, Nate Eaton, this is going to be the biggest story of your life," and you ran with it and got famous from it. So the media's already put out their narrative. By painting herself as the victim of a vast, coordinated conspiracy between the state and the media, she accomplishes two crucial psychological goals. Absolving herself of all guilt. She didn't do it. She was framed by powerful, corrupt forces, reinforcing her own importance. Small, insignificant people are not the targets of grand conspiracies. Only truly important people, people who pose a threat to the established order, are targeted in this way. In her mind, the scale of the conspiracy against her is proof of her own cosmic significance. The most chilling part of the interview comes when Nate Eaton asks Lori about remorse and the victims. Her response is a stunning display of depersonalization and a complete lack of empathy. Tylee's remains were found dismembered and burned. That's not false. JJ's remains were found wrapped in plastic and duct tape. That is not false. Okay, I hear what you're saying on those facts. Those facts themselves have so much untruth to them of how they got there. So if Tylee killed JJ and then felt bad and killed herself, why was she dead first? She wasn't. That's part of their whole fake narrative. Do you feel bad about anything that's happened? Are there regrets? Are there apologies? Anything? That's a really broad question. Broad question for the last 6 years. Do I feel bad? Do I have animosity towards anybody? Not feel bad. Do you personally feel bad or have remorse towards the victims in these cases? No one is a victim. So, are you a victim? Is that what you're saying? No. I'm not saying I'm a victim at all. I'm a tool in the hands of God. The victims that you are calling victims are not victims. Tammy died of natural causes. This is the abyss. This is the core of her pathology. The statement, "no one is a victim," is the ultimate expression of a malignant narcissist's inability to see others as real, feeling human beings. Let's break this down. In Lori's world, people are not people, they are roles. They are either light or dark, zombies or translated beings, tools for God or obstacles to be removed. Tammy Daybell wasn't a beloved wife, mother, and librarian whose life was stolen from her. She was simply an obstacle to Lori and Chad's mission. And her death, which Lori insists was natural, was a necessary event in God's plan. By denying the murder, she denies Tammy's victimhood. Charles Vallow wasn't a husband and father trying to get help for his increasingly erratic wife. He was a dark entity, a zombie named Ned, whose death at the hands of Alex Cox was a righteous act of spiritual warfare, not a victim. JJ and Tylee. This is the most horrific depersonalization. They were not her children. Their physical bodies were mere vessels that had been taken over by dark spirits or zombies. In her belief system, the real JJ and Tylee were already safe in heaven. Therefore, destroying their bodies was not murder. It was a mercy. It was freeing the world from a dark entity. This is why she can look Nate in the eye and say she doesn't see them as bones in the ground, but as happy spirits who visit her. Lori, I know where they are in heaven. I know what they're doing. They have visited me. So I don't see them as bones. If you have somebody that dies and you go to the cemetery and you dig them up 9 months later, you're not going to like what you find. My children are in the eternities. They are doing good. They're happy. This is the final horrifying justification. She has psychologically annihilated her own children, replacing their real, murdered selves with spiritual phantoms who visit her and approve of her actions. They say, "Mom, you didn't do anything wrong." This allows her to feel no guilt. How can you feel guilty for destroying something that, in your mind, wasn't real to begin with? Her claim that no one is a victim while simultaneously positioning herself as a persecuted tool in God's hands is the height of narcissistic inversion. The true victims are erased, and the perpetrator is recast as the central, heroic figure of the story. She is not a killer. She is Job, being tested by God. She is Noah building the ark. She is a Nephite, awaiting divine intervention. She is anything and everything but what she truly is, a mother who murdered her children. So, what do we take away from this disturbing look into the mind of Lori Vallow Daybell? This interview is more than just the ramblings of a crazy person. It is a textbook case study in how personality disorders, when mixed with extremist beliefs, can create a reality so distorted that it can justify the ultimate evil. Lori Vallow's journey didn't start with murder. It started with a profound sense of entitlement and specialness. Her narcissism made her susceptible to beliefs that reinforced her superiority. It is a stark reminder that personality disorders are not benign quirks. They can be the seedbeds for profound harm. We see the classic traits on full display: a grandiose sense of self-importance, a need for excessive admiration, a lack of empathy, and an inability to accept responsibility. Neither Lori nor Chad likely would have committed these crimes alone. Together, they created a feedback loop of delusion. He provided the scripture, she provided the enthusiasm, and together, they spiraled into a world where murder became a holy ordinance. It teaches us about the immense danger of echo chambers, especially those built on extremist ideologies. This case is a tragic testament to how faith can be twisted to serve the darkest human impulses. Lori uses God and Scripture not for comfort or guidance, but as a shield and a sword. God is her alibi. The Bible is her justification. She co-opts the language of righteousness to sanitize her depravity. It's a vital lesson in distinguishing true faith from the self-serving ideology of a predator. Ultimately, the most haunting aspect of this interview is the complete and total absence of guilt. She feels no remorse, because in her mind, she has done nothing wrong. The people she killed were not people. The tragedy was not their deaths, but that the world is too blind to see the divine plan she was executing. Lori Vallow Daybell wanted to tell her story, and in this interview, she did. But it wasn't the story of an innocent woman framed by a corrupt system. It was the story of a mind so completely fractured from reality, so insulated by layers of narcissism, delusion, and faux spirituality, that she can sit in a prison jumpsuit, smile for the camera, and speak of the children she murdered as if they were collateral damage in her own divine epic. She told Nate Eaton that when he is on the boat during the coming miracle, she will enlighten him. But the truth is, we don't need to wait for a flood to be enlightened. This interview is the enlightenment. It is a terrifying, cautionary look into the abyss, a reminder that the most dangerous monsters are the ones who are utterly convinced they are saints.
Lori's unwavering defense of Chad Daybell is perhaps the most critical element in understanding her psychology. This isn't just loyalty. It points strongly to a condition known as folie à deux, or shared psychotic disorder. This is a rare psychiatric syndrome in which a symptom of psychosis, often a delusional belief, is transmitted from one individual to another. Typically, there is a primary person who is genuinely delusional and a secondary, more submissive person who comes to adopt that delusion. In the Vallow Daybell case, it's a symbiotic relationship. Chad created the theological framework, the light and dark ratings, the zombies, the impending apocalypse. Lori, with her pre-existing narcissistic and histrionic traits, was a perfect vessel for these beliefs. They validated her own sense of specialness and gave her a divine justification for her darkest desires. Her statement, "Anybody who knew him knows that," is a form of gaslighting. She is attempting to invalidate the world's perception of Chad, a convicted murderer, by claiming that anyone who truly knew him would see the great man she sees. This creates an exclusive in-group, people who get it, and an out-group, the rest of the world, including the jury, who are deceived. The absolute certainty in her voice when she says, "We will, for sure, be exonerated," is not the hope of an innocent person. It is the unshakable conviction of a true believer. In her mind, the legal system is an irrelevant, temporary obstacle. The true judgment comes from God, and in that court, she and Chad are already vindicated. Her love for him isn't romantic in a conventional sense. It's the bond of two people who have built a shared reality, a fortress of delusion that protects them from the horrific truth of their actions. This reminds me of other infamous killer couples. Think of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, the Moores murderers. They too shared a twisted worldview that isolated them and enabled their horrific crimes. Or consider Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. While their dynamic was different, it was rooted in a shared, secret world of depravity. Lori and Chad's secret world was just cloaked in the language of salvation and scripture. The bond is forged not in love, but in the shared secret of their unforgivable sins. Her continued love for him is a psychological necessity. To admit Chad is a monster is to admit their entire belief system was a lie. And to admit that would be to admit she murdered her children for nothing. Her psyche cannot withstand that truth. That